May God meet you and draw you to that. Well, with that in mind, would you grab a Bible? We're in the book of Psalms. Psalm 100 is where you're going to begin with us tonight. Make your way there. Somehow that just feels like a milestone, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but like we're at Psalm 100. I mean, there's like 150 Psalms. We're like going to, be 2/3 our way through that. I don't know if that's exciting to you or if you're like ready to be done or if you find the Psalms to be entirely helpful. I know I do. I find myself just over and over in the Psalms and reading, even in our Bible reading for a church right now, we're reading in that, and I find myself just delighted. It's like, just so meets me. I mean, I love the Psalms, how they speak to our heart. Our hope is tonight that God would do that. So if you have a Bible, you've made your way or making your way there to Psalm 100. Again, Bibles are around you. Let's ask God to take His Word and make it alive to us. Let's ask Him to just communicate it to your heart and mind in a way that just meets you where you are. Would you join me in prayer for that? Father, I think about how you describe your Word. It's alive. It's active. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. That it's able to pierce all the way down into the depths of our soul, between thought and intent. Altogether, clearly, Lord, I know that nothing else can do that. Nothing else can do that work in the deepest parts of who we are. And yet I recognize that's where you want to work tonight. You're not trying to just shape our outward presentations. You're not just trying to make something look better on the outside. You're seeking to do a work deep inside of us. I love that you are. I love that that's where you work. To that I want to step towards and just surrender and say, Lord, by your word, would you work in the deepest parts of who we are? Would you do a spiritual surgery in those places that need to be worked on tonight? You can do that in such a wonderful way that though we're together, you're working in lives in different places. Believing in your power, believing in your word, believing in what you say you can do in that, I'm asking. Lord, that you would be transforming us tonight by the renewing of our minds. That you would be transforming us from the inside out by the power of your word. I present myself before you and say, Lord, here am I. That's exactly what I need. That's exactly what I want. Speak to me by your word. Speak to us by your word in a way that's just effective. Lord, help in that right now. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, Psalm 100, Psalm 101. We get to Psalm 100 and it is titled, it is a psalm of thanksgiving. It's really where we want to begin tonight, just understanding that's actually the little inscription that's began right there at the top of the psalm, where it says it's a psalm of thanksgiving. As we gaze on that, understand this is the only psalm that is so titled. Thanksgiving's a big deal, but this is the only one of the 150 that's titled a Psalm of Thanksgiving. So certainly, when we think about what that looks like, this must be definitive. That if God only labels one psalm that way, then certainly in the sense of that, there's a sense of us understanding there's something here for us to grab. We want to gaze into that this evening, but before we do that, I want to begin by just telling you how huge Thanksgiving is. What a key part it is to our lives. I find myself thinking of a number of verses, but for me, one of the clearest is found in Romans chapter 1, where Paul is describing the mess that sin brings, the destruction and the darkness it brings into lives that rebel against God and rebel against His ways. And there in Romans 1 in verse 21, it says, because although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. He looks at this rebellious mankind, and the picture here is in Psalm 1 is of a group of people that are just moving away from God. They're running away from His plans, and there's a darkness that's just crouching in and crowding into their lives. He says they know there's a God. I mean, in reality, everybody has that built into your DNA, but they deny Him. They reject Him. They reject Him as God, and it tells us in so doing they were not thankful. that thankfulness somehow becomes this conduit of this place where, because they don't recognize God and they're not thankful to Him, their hearts become darkened. Their hearts become futile. Their thoughts become darkened. And it says that they just begin this, rushing away from Him. I want you to think about this again by just this key place of thankfulness, because here's the danger. The danger is, if you're not paying attention, you might assume that thankfulness is a social grace. That it's something that's like nice sprinkles on the top, hey, if you, sprinkle it on your Christian life, it just changes the taste just a little bit. It's just a little improvement. It's not really a key or fundamental issue. Sometimes that's how we see thankfulness, as if it's like, hey, that's great. That's nice that you do that, but it's not really vital. But that's not what he says. Somehow recognizing God, seeing that God is God, it should bring us to a place where the way that we deal with Him is in a way of recognizing that we're thankful to Him. Where that doesn't happen, hearts become futile and dark. That's definitely true of those who are massively moving away from the Lord, but I have to wonder how key that can be in our lives. That when we're not thankful, when we're not people who are approaching and dealing with the Lord out of thankfulness, how our thoughts can become futile. How our thoughts and our minds and our hearts can become darkened. And I'm just telling you, hey, there's something key in this. And I want to just tell you, hey, this is something you want. This is something you need. This is something that's effective. This is something that when we think about what thankfulness looks like, we should go, so what does that look like? Like, how do I do that? Or what would that look like? And one more time. Because this is the only psalm that's titled a Psalm of Thanksgiving. It should be like, okay, this is a psalm. I mean, this is one I need to understand if I'm going to understand this key place of thanksgiving. So it's a short psalm. Let's read the whole thing, and then we'll come back and break it up and try to navigate a way through what it's talking about. Begin with me there in verse 1. Make a joyful shout to the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before His presence with singing. Know that the Lord, He is God. It is He who has made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. Enter into His gates with thanksgiving and into His courts with praise. Be thankful to Him and bless His name, for the Lord is good, and His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endures to all generations. We gaze into what's here, and there's a number of ways that you could outline it. I will outline it like this: that He begins by calling us to be thankful and to do that joyfully. To do that joyfully. Did you catch the tone? Did you catch how it began? He just tells us, hey, make a joyful shout. I mean, be joyful. Make a joyful shout to the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. I mean, let that gladness be there. Come into this place. Come before His presence with singing. Thankfulness. It is meant to be joyful. It's meant to be where it is rightly expressed, where it's rightly there. It is expressed at times in song. It is in our serving Him. But there's something about this by its very nature of what true thankfulness looks like. It's joyful. Now, again, you might be thinking, well, isn't that understood? No, not necessarily. Sometimes, again, we interpret thankfulness as a social grace, and even in our Christian lives we do that, and we kind of work it into there as if like we're doing what we're supposed to without actually being engaged. Parents, you know what I'm talking about, right? You ever had to tell your kid to do something you know that they're doing because you're telling them to do it, but they don't mean it? I mean, sometimes it's like the I'm sorry thing maybe. Like, tell your brother you're sorry. Sorry. And it's like you're not sorry. I mean, your mouth is saying it, but your body's saying something so very, very different than that. And sometimes it can be that way when we're saying I'm thankful. It's like, I'm thankful. It's like, fine. If I have to be thankful, I'll say thank you. I mean, if that's required of me as a Christian, I can somehow do that. And if you're telling me, Pastor Jim, that that's a requirement or that's a key issue in my life, fine. I will build it in. I'll tell God thank you. As if somehow it could be something that isn't real. I mean, thankfulness, it's meant to be. I mean, when it's really there, it should permeate your heart. And when it is there, when it really is there, it's not just a going through the motions where you're saying it, where you're just saying, okay, it's joyful. It's this place where it's like, yes, this is a good thing. This is a really good thing. This is something that I'm going to come before Him, that I'm going to make a joyful shout to the Lord, all you lands. I'm going to serve Him with gladness. I'm going to come before His presence with singing. Thankfulness is something that permeates that kind of tone. Where it's not there, it's missing it. True thankfulness becomes something that's an expression of our joy to God and our joy in who He is and what He's doing. Certainly, that should be there. But it's more than just an emotion. It's more, although it should be expressed that way, more than just a delight, it should be something that we're thankful knowingly. Yeah, you catch it. It's the first word right there in verse 3. Know. Like, this is something you should know. This is something you should understand. I mean, thankfulness is not just something where we're like, thank you, Lord. It's something that's permeated by our understanding of something. He says, you should know this. You should know that the Lord, He's God. It's fundamentally begins in this place where it's, okay, thankfulness is rooted in an understanding that He's God. Remember what we just read there in Romans? That's what it said. Said there's this group of people, they know there is a God, but they're denying Him, and they're not thankful. So the opposite of that is to say, I know there is a God, and I know He is God, and I know that. I know He's God, and I know this, I'm not. We're not. He made us. We did not make us. He says, know that the Lord, He is God. It is He who has made us, and not we ourselves. You are not a self-made person. You might think you are. It might have told you in your world, like, hey, you're the person that makes your own life, and you might actually believe some of the propaganda that our enemy has put out, where it somehow makes you feel like somehow your life is defined by you. That you're the one that has made you, like, you're the one that defines it. I'm just going to tell you, that's a lie. Who you are, God is the one that invented that. God is the creator of that. He's the one that made it. I think about how Paul would talk to the church in Corinth. In 1 Corinthians 4, verse 7, it says, and who makes you differ from one another? And what do you have that you did not receive? Now, if you did indeed receive it, why do you boast as if you had not received it? So what makes you different than somebody else? Why were you born in America and somebody else born in another country? Did you pick that? Was it up to you somehow and you're like, I made a really good decision where I was going to be born. That's what happened. I was kind of in charge at that moment. Really? No. So did you define that you would be who you are? No, there is 1,000, 1,000,000 things that define who you are, of where you would be born, of your gender, of your personality, things that are built into your DNA that you take credit for as if somehow it was you, as if somehow, your brain, because you can think well, like you created the brain. Like maybe you have a good voice and you're like, well, I have a really good voice. Like, so you gave yourself the voice. No, you didn't. There's not anything that you have that you didn't receive. I mean, it's a gift from Him. Our life is from Him. We are not self-made people. Whatever we do, we're only stewarding what He's given us. If we do it well, we're only stewarding something He's placed in our hands, whether it be your voice or your brain or your brawn or whatever that is, that somehow He's given you that you can put into that, and that's a gift. And somehow that should permeate it so that when you look at life, you know this. You just look at it and think, whatever it is, I mean, He's God. I mean, he's God and I'm not. I mean, this is a lie that's bigger than the evolution lie, though it's found there. It's a lie that permeates just the rebellious mankind that places us as somehow in charge, and you're just not. When you can get to the place like, okay, there's one God in the universe, and that's Him, it's not me, I'm made by Him. More than that, because He's God, we are His people, He says in verse 3, and the sheep of His pasture. Kind of what you sang just a moment ago. Like, He's created us, we're His creation, and we belong to Him. We are His property, if you want to think about it that way, His responsibility. The Lord is my shepherd. He's the one that watches over my life. He's the one that should, in that sense, be constantly represented in our mind and thoughts that way. True thankfulness brings us to a place where this knowledge permeates everything we are. Permeates everything we are. That there's just a day, just recognize, we have today. So why did you have today? Did you have today because you made today? Or did today come as a gift? Is there anything in our life that's good that didn't come from Him? Every good and perfect gift comes from His hand. It permeates our mind where we come to a place of saying, God, you're God. And you're God over everything. And all that I have really is just from you. That knowledge becomes the background. It becomes the backbone of this place of us being thankful. So we are called. It's called to be joyful. And it's not just this resignation like, okay, fine, you made me. And it's like, God, you made me. God, thank you. You're my creator. You're my God. And so He invites us to come before Him and to be thankful to Him, what I will say, actually be thankful. In other words, this isn't just like a premise, this isn't just a thought, actually do it. Enter into His gates, verse 4, with thanksgiving, and into His courts with praise. Be thankful to Him. And bless His name. See, here's the deal, and I'm just pressing a little bit if I can. For many of you tonight, you agree with me. You agree that Thanksgiving is important. You just don't ever get around to doing it. I mean, if I asked you, do you think we should be thankful to God? And you're like, yeah, I think I should be thankful to God. Do you know that God is God? Yeah, I know that God is God. So does Thanksgiving work its way into your life? And we're like, well, keep meeting. I don't know. I spend my time doing other things. I'm telling God all the things I need, or I'm failing to do it. But He says, hey, when you enter His gates, do that with thanksgiving. So it's this picture of like God being God the King, and almost like we're coming into His presence, like we're entering into those gates. Do that with thanksgiving. So if that's a picture of this relationship we have with God, how often do you enter His gates? How often do you come before Him? Well, I hope it's often. The Bible tells us we can pray without ceasing. I wonder if I could map out your day today. And I wonder how often you found yourself coming before God and talking to Him about what's going on or things that are happening. I hope, I long that there would be, if I could map your day out, there would be, she's like, I entered into His gates, and I entered into His gates, and I entered into His gates, and I entered into His gates. But here's the deal. Sometimes we rush in, and we're not really thankful. Somehow this thankfulness, it doesn't always have to be articulated. I'm not saying you have to say the words every single time. But somehow this thankfulness should permeate our relationship so that when we're coming before God, we are thankful to Him. God, you're God. You're my God. You made me. Everything I have is from you. Somehow this thankfulness is something that when we enter into His gates, it ought to be there. That, in other words, again, because for some of us, it's not that we disagree, we just don't ever get to it. We are like Thanksgiving, that's in November, right? I'll make sure to be thankful then. That's when I say thank you. I do it once a year. Instead of, no, I come before God, but thankfully. Thanksgiving permeates my relationship with him. That I come before him recognizing who he is and who I am, and that does that. And so it becomes a command, like be thankful, like actually do it. Like he says, here when you come into it, be thankful to him and bless his name. Like tell him, speak it, make sure that's a part of your life, make sure that's there. In other words, we're called to be those who are actually thankful. And I'm just calling you to it. I mean, it's a little bit what we're doing tonight, right? That's why we're here. That it should somehow permeate your life. That there should be some place in here that we are coming before God and we are recognizing who he is, that we're coming into his presence and saying thank you. He brings us to the end of the psalm, and I'll, again, just kind of put it this way so I can kind of rhyme in my little outline there. But to be thankful rightly, like it's the right thing to do. Like this is the right response. He begins it with just simply the word for. That's how he begins it in verse 5. For, like this is why. I mean, everything we've said. I mean, like all this is, to be joyful to him, to know him, to actually be thankful for. The Lord is good. He's just good. It defines his very nature. He's a good God. Thankfulness to him, it isn't a misplaced affection. It's like our God is a good God. Where you're not thankful to him, you are missing his incredible goodness. Where you are focusing on things that maybe you think he should be doing, that many times the pain and sorrow in our lives are our own doing, and then we blame it on God and accuse him of not being good. Instead of coming and saying, God, you're good. It is right for me to be thankful. And he locks it to us this way. He says, for the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. Like we think about who he is, and his mercy and his truth, they're forever. His mercy is everlasting. His truth endures to all generations. There's a bunch here that I'm not going to dive into in depth, but I'm just going to remind you that these two things placed side by side are uniquely God. Mercy and truth. That he is a God who is merciful and true. That he's righteous and yet gracious. He's the only one that is. He's the only one that handles life rightly that way. Jesus, it was said of him that he's full of mercy and truth, that it's full of who he is, that he comes to express that. There's something about just the very nature of God and the way that he does life, it's perfectly handled. He's good. He's very, very merciful, but truth undergirds everything that he is. And he does it in perfect balance, which you and I never do, but he does. And it's partly out of that we should be able to come and say, God, I trust you. Your God is good. Your God who is this. And I'm just telling you that this is really an important thing. So, thankfulness. I just want to hold it out to you as a small prescription, if I could say it that way. You might have come in here tonight and I don't know what's happening in your world. I don't know what's going on. And maybe you're thinking, I'm confused about a few things, or I have needs. Boy, I'd really love God to do this. And you hear me talking about thankfulness, and you might be thinking like, well, that's interesting. It has nothing to do with my world's a mess right now. That's not where I am. This is not effective. But I'm telling you it is. I'm telling you that thankfulness undergirding all that you do, so that when you come into this relationship with God, it is a recognition of who he is. It is a recognition of his goodness. It's an expression of saying, God, thank you. And to do so in a way that is not just forced, but it is joyful. It could change things in your life. It could literally become this place where in the midst of what you are, when you come in and to view your life and to view what you're facing and view what you're dealing with, to do it thankfully. It is something that is a joy, and it is transforming. And tonight I'm holding out to you this picture and this call for you and I to be thankful, that it should be that way. And so again, Psalm 100 becomes just this incredible picture of what that looks like, and telling you and I, hey, like this is what Thanksgiving looks like. I hold it to you. Well, holding that in one hand, we continue to the next psalm, and it changes a little bit. This really becomes a psalm that is a psalm, well, we'll say it this way, a psalm of commitment. We know this, that it's a psalm of David. That's how it begins there in Psalm 101. That's the only inscription we have, that David's the one that writes this psalm. I don't know if you read through it this week. I hope so. If you did, you might have noted that this is a really unique psalm. It's a psalm of dedication, of declaration. 9 times, David says, I will. Like, this is what I will do. 6 times he says, I shall. And then a number of other times he makes very strong commitments that fall into the same vein. Where you look at this psalm, it is a psalm of declaration, a song of commitment, but right off the bat, it becomes one that's a little bit hard. If it's okay, I'm just going to admit with you, when I first read a psalm like this, I just find myself struggling to even figure out, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Because I have a number of things that happen. For starters, I read through this psalm and just knowing what I know, knowing about David and his life, I find myself thinking, well, you didn't do a very good job with that. It's like, well, I don't know what you're saying, but it didn't seem to work entirely out for you. And find myself even wondering, okay, is this arrogance? Is this, where does this even come? And so I don't know if that's even going to meet you. I hope so as we begin to work through it. But let me just begin by telling you a couple things. This is the Bible, so it's not something that you can, like, okay, well, this is an unnecessary psalm. You can't pick this one and say, this is not one that I'm going to pay attention to. So we have to think, okay, why did God give it to us? Well, certainly one of the things we understand is the whole Bible points us to Jesus. Jesus says, you search the Scriptures, and them you think you have life. These are that which testify of me. And I can tell you right now, in this psalm is a beautiful picture of our King, one who is a great King, who does it altogether well, and everything that the psalm says is true about Jesus. So we definitely want to see that. That said, that's not the way it's being expressed. It's a psalm that's written from David. Many Bible students believe that this is a psalm of coronation. Some believe that maybe this is a psalm that was written by David maybe soon after or right around the time that he became king. They believe that this psalm became maybe his commitment to be a king. Maybe looking on the generation that had gone before, looking at Saul as a king, he steps into kingship and says, this is what I'm committing to. This is the kind of king I want to be. So much so that it was held that way for generations. There have been a number of kings and monarchs that have used this psalm and kind of held it that way as like this is what it's supposed to look like. I think it was Martin Luther, when he wrote on this psalm, I think he wrote like, I forget how many. I want to say like 80 pages, but all of a sudden that doesn't sound enough. It was a lot. I mean, he wrote a whole bunch on this psalm with the view like this is to show what justice should look like from a king or from somebody who's in political power. This is what we aim for, as if to picture everything that's there. So it certainly becomes perhaps a picture for David where he might be saying, hey, this is what I want to do. Now, again, here's our deal. I'm not a king. You're not a king. There are things that David's going to commit to in the psalm. You're like, well, I can't do that. That's not in my purview. But its application still stands. And we'll be able to work ourselves through that and understand there are things in our lives that would work the same way. But maybe we just need to get a little bit more fundamental, because there's something about this song that we might find ourselves asking, like, is this something I should actually say? Again, 9 times, David's going to say, I will do this. I will do this. I will do this. Another 6 times he's going to say, this is what I'm going to do. For some of us, we look on this, and again, my mind kind of goes there, maybe not yours, but I'm so aware of imperfection, both David's and mine, that there are times that I look at things like this thinking, I don't think I'll say that. It's like, prove myself a liar like right away. It's like, I don't even know. I mean, there's something that works into my mind that way, and I find myself recognizing that's wrong. Because there is a sense that what David does here is right. This place of saying, this is what I want to be. This is the kind of man I want to be. He's going to set a high standard, one that he's not going to fulfill perfectly, one that Jesus will fulfill. But that doesn't mean we don't seek to say, I want that. I mean, that awareness of our brokenness should not cause us, and again, I don't know if I'm making sense to anybody but me, it should not cause us to be reticent about such a commitment. Where we're like, I just, My commitment is I'm going to fail. That's what I'm going to do. My commitment is that should not be it. Paul knew he wasn't just fully what he ought to be. He writes about it in Philippians 3, and he says, I'm not what I want to be. I haven't yet arrived. But he says, one thing I do. I forget those things which are behind, and I press. I press after this high calling in Christ Jesus. Like I have a goal. I have this goal that what Jesus wants me to, and I want that. I'm not okay with being a failure. I want what he is calling me to. So this psalm becomes a picture of that. And it's a good declaration in that. I think about it this way. Before we're done tonight, we're going to sing that new song that we've been singing a little bit that's familiar to some of you, this place where we're making kind of that declaration. Yes, I will. This is what I want to be. And I know again, for a couple of you, you're like, is it okay for me to sing this song? Should I even be so bold, or should I just tell the Lord, yes, I will fail? Is it okay? No, there is a place of setting our standard high and aiming high. That's what David does. So, hard to outline, to be quite honest, because David again does 9 times. He says, I will. Another 6, I shall. Instead of trying to just work through all those, I'm going to outline it where it works for me, and this is somewhat arbitrary. It's somewhat my outline, so don't take it as the outline of the psalm, but it might help us. I tend to like, numbers, so I'm going to give you 7 I wills. So David gives you 9, and then another 6 I shalls. But I think it really moves in 7 movements. At least that's my perspective, and you could break it up into far many more just places, but things that David says, this is what I will do. He begins it in verse 1. He says, I will sing of mercy and justice to you, O Lord. I will sing praises. David just begins. He says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sing. I'm going to be one that celebrates mercy and justice. We just ended Psalm 100 saying that's who God is. That He's a God of truth and mercy, justice and mercy. That it really flows together. So I'm going to sing to Him. I'm going to sing to our God. I'm going to sing to praises to the Lord. I'm going to be someone that does that. David looks at it and says, you know what I'm going to be? I'm going to be a worshiper. That's what I'm going to do. You know what the kind of life I'm going to be? You want to know the kind of king I want? I want to be someone that worships the true king. I want to be someone that declares that. It's a desire. It's a declaration that he begins with, which is a fascinating one to put first. I'm going to sing to Him. I'm going to sing to Him. I'm going to sing praises to Him. But then he begins to move into areas that we might have perceptive that he might have begun with. He says, I'm going to do this. And he says, I'm going to behave wisely. He says, I will behave wisely in a perfect way. Oh, when will you come to me? He says, I'm going to try to do the right thing. I want to be a good king. I want to do one that is wise. I want to behave wisely. It's a great expression. And then he adds this little thought, Lord, when will you come to me? Lord, when will you come to me? It's a great little, just a quick insert that it maybe the idea is because he's going to try to do the right thing. He expects God to meet him in that. That would be a truism that the Bible tells us, like it tells us in 1 John. If we say we have fellowship with the Lord and we're walking in iniquity, it says you lie. That's not going to work for you. But if you're going to walk in the truth as He is in the truth, we have fellowship with Him and we have fellowship with one another. So it could be a way of saying that because we put God there, that we believe God's going to meet us, or it might be just an expression of dependence. God, I'm going to try to do the right thing. Help. I'm going to try to behave wisely. When are you going to help me do that? It's God, come to me because I'm not good enough for this. I'm not going to be enough of that. And that would certainly be true. And so the Bible tells us that God would do that. He says, if any of us lacks wisdom, we could ask. And so David's committing to it. Says, I'm going to try to do the right thing. I'm going to try to behave wisely. Then he says in verse 3, I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. Sorry, actually, I skipped the end of verse 2. Let me go back real fast. So I will behave wisely in a perfect way. Oh, when will you come to me? At the end of verse 2, he says, I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. I put this one separately, though it's found in one verse. I think it's a little bit of a different commitment because he just began saying, I want to do the right thing. And then he says, I want to walk. I want to walk within my house with a perfect heart. Some translations say that I want to walk in integrity. It's a good definition of that. The idea is I want to do the right thing in my house. I want to be the right person when nobody's looking. I want to do the right thing. I want to be a good person, not just as an outward persona. He says, I want my heart to do that. I want to walk within my house with a perfect heart. Again, he's not saying he is perfect. He's just saying, this is what I want. I want to be a good person. I want that not to be something that's just trying to do it on the outside. I'm trying to be that person, and that's powerful because that's what God wants for you. Who you are when no one's looking is who you really are. And there's an aim of thinking that's who we want to change. We want to be that person that we are doing the right thing from our hearts. We're doing that in a good way. With that, he then moves to verse 3, what I started to say a second ago. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. David says, I'm not going to set anything wicked. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. He says, I look on this place and I want to think about influence. I want to think about those things. And as he thinks about things that are wrong, he thinks about things that are sinful, he just says, I hate it. I hate the work of those who fall away. I hate what that is. He says, I'm not going to let it cling to me. I don't want that to be there. I want to be careful about what I do in this. Now, as we think about this, let's pause again and say, that's a good thing to commit to. But if you're a student of the Scriptures, you might think, well, David, you didn't do a really good job with that, because you set lots of bad things before your eyes. I mean, Bathsheba for starters. I mean, that's what it tells us. He sat there and looked at her. It's like, okay, you did exactly then what you said you weren't going to do here, and that's probably true in many areas in his life. But I want to come back to it and say that doesn't degrade that that's what he's wanting to be. David Guzik in his commentary said it may be better than I can. We shouldn't think David was a hypocrite because he came to fail completely living up to these high standards. It isn't hypocrisy to have a standard so high that you can't completely meet it. That's not hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is pretending that you've met it when you haven't really met it, letting people think that you're something that you're not. There's nothing wrong with saying, I got a high standard. I probably fail. I don't achieve what I want to be, but I look at it and think, hey, that's a good standard, and I want to tell you this is a good standard. And as I tell you that, I want to just be very careful but very clear. I think it's a standard that is so needed today. I think it's a standard, if I could be honest, that I think is so rare today. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. I'm going to be careful with what I let influence my life. We live in a generation that, again, just pointing into one area, sits down in front of a television screen and puts wickedness before their eyes all the time and doesn't even see a big deal about it. We live we hear Christians watching things. We're like, you watched what? It's like, I'm just watching it. I'm not actually doing it. I'm just watching it. It's just that's what Hollywood puts out, as if somehow that was okay. And we live in a generation that if I could, rewind 100 years and show 100 years ago the stuff that Christians are watching, they would be like, what? We are way down the pike on this, and I'm just telling you there should be something in your life that says, I don't want to do that. I want to be careful with what influences my heart. Now, we fail at it. I fail at it. But it is something we're trying to do. It's like I want things that influence me for right. I want things that influence me for good. Why would I put things in there that are eroding my moral fiber? Why would I, believe that, doing such wasn't going to hurt me? I mean, that's what people say all the time, and I'm just telling you it's a lie. That we would become a people that grieve over it so we could say, I hate it. That's what David says, I hate it. I hate those things. I hate the brokenness of our world. I don't want to look at it. I don't want that to be what's in front of me. I want to be someone that doesn't pursue and gaze at that. So again, he puts it so very powerfully. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. Oh, that God would increase that in our lives, that we would become those that believe in the power of influence and say, I don't want that to be a part of that. He then continues it. And again, you could see it as part of the same commitment, or I'm kind of placing it as a separate commitment where he just says, I'm not going to endure it. He says in verse 4, a perverse heart shall depart from me. I will not know wickedness. Whoever secretly slanders his neighbor, him I will destroy. The one who has a haughty look and a proud heart, him I will not endure. It's a little bit different. He began in verse 3 saying, I'm not going to intentionally put things in front of my eyes that are going to lead me astray. And then he comes to this place, and the idea is that even when you're not trying to get into it, you're going to get into it. That there are going to be things there, and you're going to find yourself in friendships, you're going to find yourself in places. He says, here's this perverse heart. You find someone who's a secret slanderer, one who's proud and haughty, and David says, I'm not going to let that be in my life. I'm going to move that away. I think about how Paul would say it in 1 Corinthians. He says, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. It's like you should just know this. Who you choose to be your close friends doesn't mean we shouldn't be an influence in the world. Don't go too far with that. We should be an influence in the world. But who we really let be in that place in our life is those who are the ones that influence our life. They shape our lives. And so David's just saying, he's saying, I'm not going to endure it. I am not going to let that be what, permeates, my heart. And maybe again as a king, he's just saying, I don't want that. I don't want that influence as a king in my kingdom. If I find somebody that's trying to use these things manipulatively, I don't want that to be a part of it. Again, did David do good at that? In some ways. He raised up a group of mighty men. In other ways, there were people that he let stay in his life that probably he should have gotten rid of. I mean, that's just honest. But it doesn't make the commitment wrong. It's like, okay, I don't want that. I don't want to endure. I don't want that to be there. He says, I want to push those away. Instead, he moves it to the positive, where he says in verse 6, my eyes shall be on the faithful of the land, and they shall dwell with me, and he who walks in a perfect way, he shall serve me. There is just a contrast. I think it's pretty easy to see it, but in verse 3, he said, I'm going to set nothing wicked before my eyes. And in verse 6, he says, I'm going to set the faithful. That's where my eyes are going to look. I want my eyes to fall. I want to put in my life those that would influence me for righteousness. I want to be on the faithful of the land, that they could dwell with me. Those who are walking in this perfect way, which he described back in the early part of the psalm as integrity and really being good people. He says, those are the ones I want to serve me. As a king, he's perhaps saying, hey, these are the kind of people I want in my court. These are the people I want working for me. These are the people that I want serving. I want this. I want to set my eyes on the faithful. God calls us to this all the way through his word. So much I could say. Where he tells us, that we are to, look to those who are good influences on us. And when we think about the hall of faith in Hebrews 11, or the place where he just calls us, to look for examples of good. He says, set those before your eyes. Set good examples and the kind of thing that would influence you for righteousness and right. Like, that's what you should pursue. That's what David's saying. He says, that's what I want to set before my eyes. That's the kind of influence I want in my life. Choose. It's funny. I think about it. It's not going to work for anybody else, but for me, I remember when Dre and I were raising our girls, and they'd gone to like a Bible camp probably, or maybe it was school, or maybe it was a radio. I can't even remember, but there was this song that they learned. And it still kind of rolls in my head at times. And it was kind of like this computer song. I think it was even singing it like in a computer, and it's kind of like, input, output, what goes in is what comes out. Input, output, choose what your life is going to be all about. It's like, okay, whatever you're letting come in, that's what's going to come out. What you choose to input, don't let it be a surprise to you. Don't be like, well, I don't even know. I don't know why all this bad stuff's coming out of my life. So what are you putting into your life? What are you putting before your eyes? Oh, I watch these raunchy shows and I, read these terrible books. Okay. So you're surprised. You're surprised that you're feeding your soul with evil, and you think it should be producing righteousness. There is a choice. I want to choose what I put before me. I want to choose, what's there. I want to choose the good things. So David makes that as a commitment, and as a part of that, he again, just presses what he's going to do with that. He says in verse 7, "He who works deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who tells lies shall not continue in my presence. Like, those are the ones I'm cutting away. Like, this is what I don't want to be there. Early I will destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to destroy this. And here, again, we come to one of these realities like, you can't fully put this into practice. I mean, it's not like you can go, can I do that? Can I destroy the wicked of all the land? I mean, some of you are like, it's a verse. It's just like, it's right there. This is a king. It's describing him as a king, what he had in his power to do. But please notice the progression. It began in verse 7 by saying, hey, I'm not going to let it be in my house. It's going to start in my home. There's things I'm not going to have be a part of my world. Then it's going to be those who are in my presence. Like, not just in my home, but those who I spend my time with. And then it's going to be to all the land. He's telling us what he's not going to put up with, that he's going to do his best to say, okay, I don't want that as a part of my world. The reality is, though you and I are not kings, there is still a realm of influence that should be ours, the kind of thing that we should be influencing righteousness. It's not a Bible verse, but it's a well-known quote from Edwin Burke that simply said, all that's necessary for evil to succeed or evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing. That in many ways, the thing that lets evil do so much in our world is because good people don't put a stop to it. Now, there are things that you can't do. Obviously, you're not a king. You can't execute or do those, but there are places where you can say, I don't want that in my world. I don't want that in my life. I'm going to do my best to influence and push away and drive away things that are wrong in my life. I want to be someone who in my sphere of influence says, no, that is not what we're after. That's not the life that we have. And to the extent of your influence, I just tell you, that's what David's committing to. He's just saying, that's what I want my life to be. It began with worship. It continued into his own personal integrity, to his hatred for what's wrong, saying, I'm not going to put the wrong before my life, and I'm going to put the right before my life, because I want my life to be an influence. I want to be someone that changes the atmosphere of a room for good. It's a good place to be. It's a good commitment. David wasn't a perfect king, but he was one of the best. God will hold him as the standard through us, so much of the rest of the Bible. Like, well, his heart wasn't as loyal to God as David's was. Like, he is a pretty good king, but he never got to the height that David got to. In all of David's imperfections, and they were many, he made a difference. His life influenced the world. Such a commitment that is here in David's, it's one that's worth your emulation and mine. It's worth a place where we'd say, that's what I want to be. I want to be a good person. I want to be someone who's doing the right things and changing things. Wow. As you want that, I hope you do. Can I just come one more time and tell you, David was the imperfect model. Jesus is the perfect model. Jesus is one that his life was a worship to God. His life was a living sacrifice. Jesus was one that handled everything well. He behaved wisely and walked in integrity. He's the one that was nothing bad about. He's one that never set wickedness before him, and he hated it, won't endure it. He's one that his focus and his passion is for the faithful, and he will destroy the wicked. He is going to be the one that rights our world. And I just want to tell you something beautiful about that. And in the midst of it, where we should say, okay, I want more of that. I'm just inviting you to it. I'm just inviting you to it. So we get two very different psalms tonight. We get one that's inviting you and I to be thankful, to just our relationship with God to be one that we are responding to his goodness and saying, God, I'm thankful. But another part that we're coming and saying, I will do this. Where I could say with Paul, I want to press high. I want to aim high to be a good woman, a good man. I want to walk in the things that are of God. And I'm inviting you to that kind of place tonight. I don't know where your life is, and I don't know what's taking place, but I can tell you that there's not any one of you here that this wouldn't do you good, that it wouldn't be a right response for where you are, that you could come tonight and say, God, I just want to be thankful. I want to be one that recognizes you're God and I'm not. And I want to be one that receives my life as a gift from you. And then, God, I want to be a good person. I want to worship you. I want to be a person of integrity. I want to be a person who's pushing away evil and trying to do the right thing. I want to be one that is in a broken world going in the right direction. So I'm inviting you to such a place tonight. I'm inviting you into a place wherever this meets you, that you would find yourself just stepping towards an end to that. And I'll tell you this again, it could change your world. So you can close your Bibles. Let's go before God right now and ask that He would bring us into this very reality. Father, I thank you for these two Psalms tonight, and I pray for both of them in my life and in our lives here. It is right that we come before you and say thank you. God, you are so good. You are so gracious. You are so true. You made us, we didn't, and just wanted to say thank you. I just want to be thankful. I want my thankfulness to be one that's genuine, that recognizes you're God, you're my God. I'm so glad for that. Thank you. Help us to be thankful, Lord. Help us to be a thankful people, and not just once a year or in just spasmodic expressions, Lord, that it be a constant part of our life. And then, Lord, would you help us to commit to pursue you? That we would long to be those who are true worshipers, who sing to you. That we'd say, Lord, I want to be a man of integrity. I want to set nothing evil before my eyes. I don't want to just endure that stuff. I want to push it away, and I want to set what's good there. And Lord, I want to influence. I want to be one that changes the atmosphere wherever I am for righteousness. God, would you give us such wholehearted commitment where we could say, yes, I will. I want to do that. I want to be that. I want to pursue you. I want to love you. I want to live for you. There's a lot of things in our lives tonight, but I know these would change things. So, Lord, apply that in your perfect way, changing us from the inside out. Make us who you have us to be. We ask for it tonight in Jesus' name.